What's up guys? I'm really sorry I haven't been filming lately. I feel really terrible. This is going to be like the first video I've done in forever. I'm happy to be able to be doing deck profiles again though, because these are what I enjoy doing the most and giving you guys these lists. This is one of the decks I've been the most excited for in a while. 12 Apostles has been something I've been wanting to build, but it's always been like really clunky and kind of weird. I want to actually dedicate this deck to Bob, who's a really good friend of mine. He was one of the judges at the Las Vegas event, and he wasn't able to come down to the Los Angeles AGP. And I was really looking forward to hanging out with him because we got to kind of connect in Vegas, and we didn't really get to hang out. So this is for you, Bob. I want to dedicate this deck to you. And yeah, this deck is actually a really interesting deck. At first, I was kind of not expecting it to do really well, but I'm actually really convinced that this could do pretty good in the meta as like a really anti-meta-ish rogue deck, because I still think Barrier of Shadows and Hera and a lot of those kind of required cards that we've had to use this last couple metas to stop like Change the World and stuff is still going to see a lot of play. And because Blazer is the ruler for this deck, we don't really use any Regalias or it's not ruler or Regalia related at all. So your opponent kind of has all these dead cards in their deck that don't really do much against you. And what this deck is really good at doing is pushing for damage, which Black has always had a lot of problems with. And it's really quick. Like by turn 4, there's times where I could just immediately get game and your opponent can't do much about it. So to go over just like I guess the J ruler and why we use Blazer, the deck is very heavy around red black, and so of course for anyone that doesn't know, Blazer produces red for every stone you control. I mean every stone you have can also produce red, so that way you're able to play like black stones and have all red at the same time. So because we don't have dual stones, you're forced to be able to have some kind of mana fixing to play this deck, and so being able to have all darkness stones, which is a really big deal, and then still be able to have all fire is what you're kind of going for. For the stones themselves, I run 4 of the Black Moon's Memoria, 3 of the Sorrowful Necromancy, and just 3 darkness. The reason why I'm skimming through these really quickly is because this doesn't really matter. Having the moon is kind of nice because I side Lucifer, and I do have Izanamis in here. But a lot of the times, the Izanamis and the Lucifers are kind of just meant to either push for damage or the Izanamis themselves too, you can destroy cards with them from the graveyard. So if you're kind of like a budget player and you don't want to pick up either the Sorrowful Necromancy, I just threw 3, you can even do 4/4/2. I'm just really weird on my OCD about having like 2 of stones, I don't know why. But for like, from all my practice, I've noticed that it doesn't really matter how many darkness stones you run or black moons or whatever. You can literally have just 10 plain dark and the deck would still run totally fine. So if you don't want to get like the flashier stones that might come into handy in certain situations, because you could discard a card from your opponent's hand, for example, like with Izanami, you can definitely just get the 10 darkness stones and it wouldn't matter. So for stones, don't worry about it too much. If you have the black moons and the sorrowful, they could come in handy in certain situations, but typically I never really came into a situation where I used most of them. The core for the deck is just a lot more important. So it seems it's a very kind of strange deck, but I'll try to go over everything and make sure you guys understand how it works. So Guinevere is one of the most important cards in this deck, not even just because of like the obvious greatness that Guinevere has, but being able to sacrifice all the searchers that we have in this deck, because there's Messenger Familiars and Rukh Eggs, really gets your handful of all of the combo pieces you need, because this is an extremely heavy combo deck. Also, the pump effect that Guinevere has, where you pay 1 red and then something gains +4/+4, I've actually had that be just enough damage to be able to OTK my opponent, because this deck actually does have a really big OTK potential, and so there's no way I wouldn't play Guinevere in this. It's just really strong. And then Messenger Familiar, it's one of the newer cards we got in BFA that really makes this deck work. Messenger Familiar says when it's sent to the graveyard from your field, you can search your deck for a 12 Apostle, reveal it, and add it to your hand. Why this is so important is because the deck kind of plays in like this one-man army kind of aspect. You sit on Gill and just discard 12 Apostles to get them really strong until you're prepared to just kill them off by summoning one of the bigger ones with this shift effect. And this really helps you add all of those little pieces to your hand. It's also really good for Adombrali because he's also a 12 Apostle. So if I search if I go like turn 1 Guinevere, turn 2 like Messenger and a Rukh Egg, because I do play 4 Rukh Eggs as well, like the whole deck is literally just floating. Like you just want to have infinite blockers, infinite setup to be able to fill up your hand, and you just go all out in one turn and just wipe them out. And it's really, really quick. I wasn't expecting it to do as well because I figured it'd be too much kind of all these searching cards and you're not really doing anything, but the amount of push you have really, really makes up for all the kind of lack of early turns. So let's say your first turn is like a Guinevere, and your turn 2 you go into like a Rukh Egg and a Messenger or something. It's really strong because if you sack the, like, let's say the Rukh Egg and the Messenger for an Adombrali, it's just a really strong play. And you can even like use the Guinevere on the Messenger to search the Adombrali and then draw 2, discard 1 of course, and then just sacked the Rukh Egg and then used up Guinevere to summon Adombrali and then just blow something up that your opponent controls. Targeting I think is going to be really weak this format, because cards like Vivian into Escort is really strong, so you try to target her, but she prevents that. Machina, which is going to be really big this format, has Dummy Doll, which prevents targeting. And so I think the 400 from Adombrali really early is going to be really like important to stop up all your opponent's setup. And then all the other cards I use don't really target as well. So I also run Lancelot in this. At first I didn't have these because I didn't feel the need to rush my opponent, but after realizing how strong Izanami was, being able to hit your opponent for 2 sets of 600, so 1200 damage in total, 28 is kind of the life you want to get them down to by turn 4, because being able to attack with Gill and one of the bigger 12 Apostles is just immediate game. And there's kind of a way that I can show you guys later that it's kind of like your opponent can't do anything to stop it. And so I figured the only other card that can push for 6 really quickly other than Izanami is Lancelot. And I actually don't mind to, like, the 700 blow up effect is really hard to use on Lancelot, because I would have to pay like 4 red in order to pump him up. There's no like Necromancies or Hectors or anything in here, so he's mainly just for the 600 push, because your opponent is either always like a little shy of dying late game, or a little shy of being OTK'd in the middle. So having these like little 600 pushes is really, really good. Not to mention that except for Dark Purge, there isn't really any card that just immediately kills Lancelot on your, like if it's your turn and you're swinging, there isn't much your opponent can do. There's cards like Space-Time Collapse that people use and stuff, but typically Space-Time Collapse, like if they Space-Time Collapse used up Lancelot for me, it's totally fine because I got what I wanted him for, because the deck doesn't like rely on aggro too much. Even just like 1 or 2 swings is totally fine. So Lancelot's been doing really well. And then like to go into the actual like 12 Apostle kind of setup, we have Interdimensional Monarch Gill Lapis. This is the card that makes the entire deck work, kind of the whole one-man army kind of feel. So the way this card works is first of all, it's a shift card, which I'll get into soon, but I'm just going to speak about its enter real quick. When he enters the field, you can search your deck for a 12 Apostle and another card named Attoractia, Dimension of the 7 Lands. I actually do run that as well because it lets you search for both. If you, it's not either or, so you get to search a 12 Apostle and Attoractia, and it's actually really important to search Attoractia, but for totally different reasons, which I'll get into later. But the continuous effect on a Gill, deactivate I mean, is to discard a 12 Apostle, and he gains +4/+4 in target attack. And any buff that this side gets will stay on the shifted side. So if anyone's still kind of confused about shifts, shift is an activate, and it's not something that your opponent can use like Wall of Wind or Seal on. So if I'm on this side, which you have to start off, this side must be valid in your deck. You can't use Rukh Egg to search this card even though the other side is red. If you pay 2 red and 2 colorless, this card can shift. So pretty much you summon him on turn 3 and you search a 12 Apostle. If you've already hit with Lancelots on turn 2, you can try to like start setting up for the OTK so you can get one of the other bigger 12 Apostles like Behemoth or Leviathan. But you can also kind of use Gill in a way to just like slowly wipe your opponent's board. The target attack is actually really, really big, and I love being able to just use searched Izanamis to just discard them to start attacking stuff and then use the Izanamis later on from the graveyard. It just feels like you're not actually like minusing for using the cards. And then we have the shift side of this card, which is what makes this card so great. So once again, I don't want anyone to get confused. You can't have this side of the card in your deck, and you also can't search this card with Rukh Egg. But this card is a 10/10. Oh, I should say 1,000,000. Sorry, I've been playing a lot of Magic lately. But so it's 1,000,000 and it has target attack. And when this card enters the field or shifts, you can, because of course you can play it from this side on your hand too. So also another, I don't want anyone to get confused. Shift cards can be played on either side from your hand as long as you pay the cost on the actual card. So if you pay 2 black and 1 colorless, it'll go into the field on this side and you'll search. Or you can choose to just summon it on this side and then pay the 2 red and 2 colorless and you'll summon it like this. But that would be able to be sealed or Wall of Winded or anything that has to do with like in the chase. It still counts as like a regular summon. So the only time you can't seal it is if it's on this side and then you choose to shift from the field onto this side, which is typically I use both sides. Sometimes if it's a late game and I need to just push, I'll summon it on this side, but if I want to set up, I use this side. So this is one of the shifts that you actually do use both of the sides for, because I've been seeing a lot of shift decks and a lot of people use like Alice of Shadow, and in that one you literally never use the light side, they just use the dark side. So you could summon either side just to clear up any confusion, but you want to go into this side, use kind of like, since there isn't a lot of destruction spells right now, your opponent has trouble killing him because like double space-time anomaly still won't kill this if you discard like an Izanami, because he'll have 100 defense left because it goes to 1100. Double Dark Purge is like one of the only things that will, but you can even discard 2 12 Apostles to keep him alive. It's just really hard to get him off the field, and if you summon this and search everything you need and shift the next turn, it's actually really likely that you might immediately win the game. There's just so much damage that you can do. So this side says that when he enters the field, you can put a 12 Apostle from your hand into the field, which is perfect because you searched it with the other side. And it gains swiftness, but it leaves the field at the end of the turn and gets removed from game. So pretty much you get 1 hit and then it goes away. And then to go into the actual package of the 12 Apostles I run, there's 4 Izanami. Like I said, getting the early 600s in really early is the biggest thing that you want to do with this deck. You never want to try to set up too much and fall behind on damage, because then your opponent will be able to like out aggro you if they're playing like Fairies or Machina. It can get really hard to deal with all the remote control beasts and stuff if you let them get a little too ahead. So it's really important just to get a few swings in early game and then worry about finishing them off in one big hit. So I was gonna play only like 3 Izanami, but I actually felt as though 4 was really good because I wanted to make sure, like a perfect situation would be like turn 2 Izanami, and then if they don't do anything about it, because Izanami, like nobody really wants to block Izanami because you lose a card by blocking it, and if you use kill spells on my Izanami, I can use its effects later. So nobody likes blocking Izanami or using any kill spells on it. So it's kind of like you squeeze in a sneaky 600 before they notice that it's gonna be too late to do anything about it. So like a turn 2 Izanami, and then turn 2 attack with Izanami again, they just go, that's fine, I'll take it. That's 1200, and then if you summon Lancelot and attack and they block, it already doesn't matter because they've taken 12, and on your 4th turn, you can just summon the red side of Gill and just drop your stuff and win if you've already searched everything from like the first couple of turns of maybe blocking with the messenger to search the Leviathan or anything by that means. So the Izanamis and Lancelots I think are just really, really important. You need to be able to push for early damage. And then I have 3 Adombrali. This card at first I wasn't going to run. I didn't know if it was going to be worth the space, but I actually really ended up liking this. Sometimes your opponent can get a little too smart and they won't attack for a little bit until they've really set up their board because they don't want you to be searching. And being able to punish that kind of like patience by sacking your stuff for Adombrali anyway feels really good. It just gives you more kind of sack targets. And also another really relevant thing about Adombrali is the 400 life they lose when you summon it by sacking a black is actually really relevant, because like I said, you're always just squeezing for that little bit more damage just to finish them off. And so there's been times where because of that 400 I was able to OTK, and it's just so good. Like I was only playing 2 of these at one point, but I added another one. And then for the 1 of 12 Apostles, there's 1 Valentina. Valentina still, in any deck that you can have Guinevere, I think Valentina is really good because you could just sack their cards so they never get it back. It doesn't make it situational. And then there's also, I wanted a main deck answer to Urthr, and I could bounce Urthr with Leviathan, but I would have to discard 5, and sometimes that could be really hard in decks that use Urthr because the same decks like are like Xion that use Celestia and Lucifer, and that might take a lot of resource to get over. So I wanted a card that I could just summon, maybe even with just Gill, take the Urthr, attack them for 8, and then sack the Valentina and the Urthr for Adombrali. And then since I'm going to lose the Valentina anyway at the end of turn, I squeeze in 800 damage, I remove the Urthr, and then I draw a card for sacking the blue, and then I heal 400 for sacking the Urthr. So Valentina has been really good. It just gets like problem cards off the field. And you can also like take the floaters that Machina has, so like Roblox and the TikTok guy, and then that way they don't get the effect because you tribute it on your side. And then there is Behemoth. Behemoth's in here because he's one of the first OTK potential cards. Being able to attack and they're forced to take 15 no matter what is really, really strong. If you go churn 3 into the black side of Gill and then you discard a 12 Apostle and shift, and that would make them a 10-10, and then the 4-4 lingers, so it's 14-14. And then you summon Behemoth. If you can get the 14 in and then attack with Behemoth, at that point they're taking 29, which is just enough for 2 of the 6s from either an Izanami and Lancelot or 2 Lancelot attacks. Just whatever you did 1200 with to be just enough to finish them off. And it seems kind of situationary, but when you play the deck, it's just there isn't much they can do. And in a situation where they might have a blocker to block the Behemoth, which means they'll still take the 15, but they might block the Gill, so then you won't get all the damage in. That's actually why I run Leviathan. At first, I was messing around with this card as a joke, but it immediately became the greatest 12 Apostle in this deck. There's no situation in which I haven't relied on Leviathan that's just gone bad. I was playing against a friend who was playing Machina because we wanted to make sure we had the right answers for the deck, and just dropping Leviathan and being able to bounce their entire board, and the Robloxes don't go off and the TikToks don't go off, and I just attack for game is so strong. Like I said, if you go churn 3 Gill and you search maybe an Izanami, and because you already have this, or you search this and you already have the Izanami, being able to attack with the 14 and the 15 is 2900, which, like I said earlier, is the same as Behemoth, 2 600s earlier, or maybe a 600 and something, maybe 100 from a messenger and then a sack for Adombrali. The numbers add up just right, and it's so good. Especially because they can't do anything once Leviathan hits the field. You bounce everything and just attack freely, and they're forced to take all that damage. So if they can't beat you, a late game Lancelot or an Adombrali will be enough too. And I just think it's so strong. Leviathan has become just one of my favorite cards this entire format. Being able to cheat it in with Gill is so strong. And then the cool part is how I was mentioning that I run the Attoractia. So this card is when this card enters the field, you draw a card, and then you can shift it as well. What I actually use this card for most of the time is fodder for Leviathan. So Leviathan's enter specifies that when he enters the field, you discard your entire hand. You don't have a choice. And for every card you discard, you get to bounce the cost of 1 for every card you discarded on your opponent's field back to the hand. So if you discard, let's say 2 cards, because you only had 2 cards in your hand, you would bounce all 2 or lower to your opponent's hand. And so when I summon Gill and I search the Leviathan and it searches this as well, this becomes that extra card to discard for Leviathan that's 1 more cost. So if I have 4 cards in my hand and this is 4 cards with Leviathan and this is the 5th card, when I summon the Leviathan, I now still have 4 cards in my hand just because this was free, and being able to discard this along with everyone else just adds more levels I can bounce to my opponent's hand. And most of the time, because everything floats in this deck, you always have around 6 or 7, so it's never an issue. But it's just nice to know that this is kind of that extra card. And then it's not bad either, because if you're playing as a grindy deck and you can actually flip this using Gill, because Gill actually says you can either put a 12 Apostle into the field, or you can shift a card for free. So instead of paying the 7 to shift this card, you can shift it with Gill. And so to make I don't want to read out the text on this card because it's really confusing. It lets you automatically win the game if you remove 1 of every color from the game using its effect, because you can tap it to remove an addition, a regalia, or a resonator with with a specific color from the game, but you can't double up on 1 color. So you never use it to automatically win the game. It's kind of more of just late game. If I flip this, I can take out a Barrier of Shadows because it's dark. I mean, you might not be playing any dark resonators I'm worried about. Another a Void Regalia, a Change the World because it's void, and that's a void card. And then maybe I'll hit your Celestial Wing Seraph because it's light, and this 1 card removed 3 cards. So it's not particularly too great. It doesn't go off quite that often, but even just having it as discard fodder for Leviathan just makes it a really, really good combo piece. And then for the non-12 Apostle stuff, I have 2 Urthr. This combos with Flame King Shout. Like I said, targeting isn't really that strong this format, and Urthr does target, but I wanted to be able to use cards like Flame King Shout, and she's still just the best target for that card. Being able to blow up something really big while wiping everything small is just really great. But I also decided to run 1 Ywain. So when Ywain attacks, it deals 200 damage to all resonators on the field. And what makes this so good is if your opponent has a field full of fairies and they're all 2/3s or whatnot, and they have a Vivian, if you Flame King Shout and your opponent responds by tapping the Vivian to drop a 1-drop fairy, it would give all of them +2/+2, which would leave all the ones that have 300 defense at 500, and the Flame King Shout would no longer be able to kill them. You can then use Ywain to attack into Vivian because it's now rested, and the 200 damage it does to everything would still wipe out all of the fairies able to block, and then you trade with the Vivian because she'd be like a 7, I believe a 7/9. Yeah, a 7/9. And it'd be worth it still because you wipe their entire board with one Flame King Shout and Ywain. And the best part is because Blazer's your ruler, he can't like if most fairy decks are going to be using Reflect as a ruler, and they can't negate the Flame King Shout, because if they have Reflect on the field, you simply just go chase Blazer, deactivate Blazer, and they're forced to chase Reflect's effect to flip back to prevent themselves from being destroyed by the Blazer. And so when the Blazer enters the field, they have no Reflect to stop you from Flame King Shouting anymore, and then you just activate Flame King Shout and wipe their board. So it even makes sense for Blazer to be the ruler because it makes your Flame King Shouts just unnegatable, which is really, really cool. And then I have the 3 Soulhunts. I needed something that was like really low cost that would just wipe little stuff off the board. I felt as though targeting was just really weak, and I wanted to run Demon Flames, but Dummy Dolls and Vivians, they didn't do enough. So if your opponent goes first and they go like Clockwork Soldier pass or Wind Sprite and pass, and you just open up with Soul Hunt, it actually puts you in a really, really good position, and it helps you start squeezing in the damage from like the turn 2 Izanamis or Lancelots without your opponent being able to just like set up too quickly and make you fall behind. So I actually really like the Soul Hunt. I was gonna play like, I had Space Time Anomalies here at one point and like some blue, but the colors will sometimes get inconsistent, so I just figured I'd just stick with the Soul Hunts and focus on no targeting at all. And then same thing with the Flame King Shout. So I just wanted non-target removal that was going to just completely wipe the board and be able to deal with all the new aggro decks that I think are going to be really heavily in the meta, while still being able to set up some damage push because it does give the card swiftness. Like being able to attack with the 800 from Urthr. If they've taken a 600 from Lancelot before, that's 1400. Which means the 1500 from Leviathan would make them 1100 left, which is the Gill's 1000 side plus a discard before you flip, or like the Gill's 1000 side and a squeeze in from Messenger or Adombrali. So the numbers add up really well in this deck. You just have to know how to pace yourself. It's something that you have to kind of play a couple times to get the feel of. So it is kind of complicated, but if you get the hang of it, the combos start going off and you feel really, really in control. Your opponent just can't do much to stop Leviathan or Gill, especially if they didn't stop the turn 3 Gill. Being able to just shift and there's nothing they can do just sets you in such a good position. So that's it for my 12 Apostle deck. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I put a lot of testing into this, so I hope you guys have just as much success with it as I did. It's been doing really good against Fairies and Machina, which is what I think is going to be played really heavily this format. So hopefully you guys will have just good luck with it as well. I haven't put a side deck together really because I don't exactly know what the meta is. The only thing I know is I'm going to be siding at least like 2 Black Moonbeams. So I know I needed like an answer for J-Rulers and Reflex, so that's nice to have. I didn't really want to main it though because they kind of felt dead. I didn't feel as though I needed it game 1. Just to make sure, just in case your opponent plays like Tree or something, I didn't want any deck cards. But I'll kind of, make the final decision after I test a bit. But I also want to let you guys know that I don't know if I mentioned it in my last the sneak peek opening, but I did start a Twitter page, and so if you guys have any like questions or stuff, just follow me on there and ask there. It's kind of easier to keep everything on one page instead of me trying to like go through my messages on Facebook and then like the wall as well and everything. It just makes it seem a little more clunky on Facebook. So if you guys want to just add me on Twitter or follow me, I don't know how this like social media stuff works, but I'm like kind of new to it as well. But just follow me on there and ask anything you guys have any questions with. I'm also going to be putting like updates there, so like video schedules or what deck profile is coming up. It's just really easy to be able to communicate that all in one place. So follow me there. The link will be in the description. Fairies are going to be the deck I'm going to be doing on Thursday. I was gonna do Machina originally, but I made like a poll on Facebook and everyone seemed to have liked the idea for doing Fairies first. So it should be Fairies this Thursday, and then next week will probably be Rezzard and Machina. So stay tuned for those. Subscribe to make sure that those videos come straight to you. It just makes it a ton easier. Thanks for being patient with me with all this like kind of absence time. I've been really wanting to get back into it. I just haven't had any time at all. I've been working like 60 hours a week. So thanks again. Definitely subscribe, and I'll definitely catch you guys next time.